Welcome to Cora's Cottage, where things are homegrown and handmade. I started my journey in town on a small city lot where I grew a garden and preserved most of what I grew. While I was in town, I continued to learn kitchen and other homemaking skills. However, recently, my husband and I have had the opportunity to move out into the country. This means we have more space, and I will be expanding my garden and preservation skills this summer. I want to continue to expand my homesteading and homemaking skills as well. Follow along with me on this journey as I share what I learn. I thrifted this twin top sheet a while ago with the intention of turning it into curtains for the area that doubled as an office and our mudroom. But we have moved since then, and I obviously didn't get around to turning it into curtains for that area, so I've decided that it would work perfectly for curtains for our master bath. For this project, I started by folding that top sheet into fours and then cutting along the folds. Then once I had my panels, I went ahead and squared them up and made sure that they were all the same size by cutting along a stripe. Now, normally I would measure out my fabric, but because I had the stripes and when I measured it out, my panels would need to be just slightly over what a fourth of this bedsheet top was, it worked out perfectly to do it this way. When determining what the width of my panels needed to be, I measured what size my windows were, and then I went ahead and added 8 to 10 inches and divided that number by 2 because I'm going to use 2 panels for each window. This gave me what size each panel needed to be as far as width went so that it would cover the window properly. I ended up needing to trim off the bottom portion of the top sheet to make it the correct length for what I wanted for these windows. I certainly could have left it this length, but it felt really awkward. It was a little bit too far below the window trim to look good, but wasn't long enough to be a full-length curtain. So I ended up trimming off about 15 inches at the bottom, which was a perfect amount for me to be able to take that and turn it into some tabs across the top. I was able to take those scraps and create enough tabs for all of my curtains. I was a little ways into this project when I remembered I had picked up this temporary cutting mat and a rotary cutter to help make big projects like this easier. So I ran and grabbed those, and it did make it a lot easier, especially trying to measure out a straight line, and then it made it so much easier to cut a straight line. That can be really tough with scissors. It can get a little jagged on the edges. So if you're going to do a project like this, I do recommend getting at least a temporary cutting mat or even a long-term one if you think that you are going to do projects like this often. I have a long-term one that is self-healing on the way, just waiting for it to arrive. You might notice that I'm using a pen instead of a fabric pencil, and it's a bright red pen at that. I'm using this pen because it's a friction erasable pen, and not only is it erasable, but it comes out in the wash, which makes it the perfect tool for any sewing projects. I'm never having to hunt for where my pencil marks are because this bright red pen shows up great on pretty much all fabrics. There's several different colors, so you can adjust for whatever works best on your fabric, but you will never know that I marked up these white curtains with this red pen. These pens are also great for little kids if they insist on having a pen because they wash out, so there's no worries when they mark up their clothes instead of that paper. I'll drop a link in the description so that you can pick some up too. I repeated the process of squaring up each panel and trimming down the bottom to the proper length 4 times because there are 2 windows and I wanted 2 panels for each window. Once all of my panels are cut to the appropriate sizes, it was time to hem my rough edges. So here I am doing a single fold hem that is a 1/4 inch that I will turn into a double fold hem later so that all of my rough edges are tucked in and not exposed. I made sure that I backstitched at both the beginning and the end and trimmed any of my excess thread. Then it was time to take that single fold hem and turn it into a double fold hem, so that's what I'm doing here. I measured my first one, but then after that I didn't need to because I was able to follow a stripe along. Before putting a pin in, I would just make sure that it was lined up with that stripe that I knew was a 1/4 inch. This isn't something that you have with all fabrics, but was a nice bonus of this fabric. Then it was time to put a single stitch in to hold that in place. I made sure to backstitch at both the beginning and the end and to trim off my excess tails of thread. I finished turning the single fold hem into a double fold hem all the way around my panels so that none of the rough edges of the fabric were showing. And then it was time to cut my tabs for the top of the curtain to hang it. Then it was time to go ahead and cut my panels that would be my tab tops. So these I cut each one to be 4.5 inches by 12 inches because I wanted a final tab top to be approximately 5.5 to 6 inches by 2 inches. I needed a total of 16 of these because I want 4 tab tops on each of the 4 panels that I have. So that came out to a total of 16. So then I'm going to go ahead and get those cut to size. The striped fabric made this a lot easier because once I got started, I could just cut right along a stripe. With all of my panels cut, it was time to go ahead and get them pinned so that I could stitch them closed. So I wanted to fold them in half so that they were inside out before pinning them because I want the seams to be on the inside so that they aren't seen from any side of the curtain. With all of my panels cut and pinned inside out, it was time to go ahead and run a single straight stitch into each of these panels to make my tack tops. So with these, it was super easy to run a straight stitch because of the pinstripes in the fabric. You can also line it up with the side of your foot to help keep you straight when you are sewing these stitches. So I made sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end and to cut off any excess thread that was left so that that wasn't hanging out when I was trying to attach these to my curtain panels. Once all 16 tag tops were sewn closed, it was time to go ahead and turn them right side out. Now you can do this without a safety pin, but I find it a lot more challenging and the safety pin to make this a lot easier. So I just attach a safety pin at one end and then thread it through, pulling the fabric as I go, and then I pull it out the other end and my tag top is turned right side out. Then I rinsed and repeated this 16 times to do all of my tag tops. Once all my tab tops are turned right side out, it was time to go ahead and fold them in half with the seam tucked into the middle. Then I went ahead and stitched the bottoms closed so that it was a lot easier when I was attaching these to my curtain panel. When attaching these to my curtain panel, I started by attaching one on each end and pinning it in place. I knew that I wanted to be in about a 1/4 inch from the edge, so I started there and then I would place my others and adjust as needed. Now I'm also using this opportunity to turn this hem into a double fold hem, as it's currently just a single fold hem. So here you can see I spaced them out visually about what I thought was even and then used my yardstick to make sure that it was in fact evenly spaced between each of the tab tops. I had to do a little bit of adjusting before it was time to go ahead and pin those into place and pin up the rest of my double fold hem. For my first curtain, this is where I went ahead and added a single stitch along the hem to stitch everything in place before I folded the tab tops over so that they were hanging the proper way on the curtain. However, the second time around, I was a little more confident, so I went ahead and just folded my tab tops up and repinned them in place so that I could do this all in one step. This saved time and I found it to be a little easier, but you can certainly do it either way, whichever you're more comfortable with and is easier for you to keep your tab tops in place without them sliding and moving all over. Then it was time to go ahead and do my final stitch for this curtain panel. So I made sure to backstitch at both the beginning and the end of this panel and cut off any of my extra tails. So when I was stitching this, I am making sure that I am getting that double hem held in place as well as the tab tops. Now it is important that you are folding those tab tops back up because otherwise it's going to make your curtain lay funny when you are hanging it. This way the curtain lays nice and smooth when you're hanging it from your curtain rod and you can't tell that they were folded down originally. After washing my curtain panels to get that red friction pen out, it was time to go ahead and hang them. Now, we don't have permanent curtain rods in this house just yet, but these temporary ones will work perfectly until we do. So I go ahead and get these curtains threaded onto my curtain rod and hung up. Then I adjust them to get them spaced properly, but since it's nice and bright out, I'm going to go ahead and leave them nice and open so that we can enjoy the sunlight. Then it was time to rinse and repeat on the second window. While I made short curtains for these small windows, you could take the principles that I used here and apply it to any window and just adjust your measurements to fit the windows you are wanting to make curtains for. I'm super excited to have these curtains as the weather gets warmer because they will be the perfect addition to having a spring breeze blowing through these windows.